Yes, here we are once again, everyone. Cannabis News. I'm your host, Joe Klare. It is April 22nd, 2019. Our first show after 420. Hopefully, all of you had a great 420. If you want to see some videos of some 420 celebrations, go check out marijuanatimes.org. The show, as always, is presented by the Marijuana Times. Today, talking about a new bill introduced in California that would help veterinarians when it comes to prescribing cannabis for pets. Also, I want to talk a little bit about a documentary, a new Netflix documentary that I just watched today. Play you the trailer for that. I'll give you my impressions and tell you to, if there's a reason for you to go check it out. I vetted it beforehand, so you don't have to waste your time. I'll let you know. Also, Native American tribe in Michigan has approved adult use marijuana legalization. All of that coming up. But first, of course, Cannabis News is brought to you by NatureSide, nature-side.com. And their organic, all-natural pesticides. Make sure you grow safe and poison-free and aren't putting harmful chemicals on your grow. Don't use banned pesticides in the state that you are growing in. You can accomplish all these things, of course, with NatureSide. Nature-side.com, a proud sponsor of Cannabis News. Go check them out because they're awesome. This first story from Jason Sander at marijuanatimes.org. California introduces bill to allow veterinarians to recommend cannabis for pets. A bill was recently introduced in California that would legally permit veterinarians to recommend cannabis products for pets. This, according to a story from the VIN News Service, the bill will now make its way to the state's veterinary medical board. If the board approves the bill, it will be the first of its kind in the nation. Back in the summer of 2018, California lawmakers allow for the legal protection of veterinarians who choose to discuss with pet owners whether or not cannabis products will be right to administer to their pets. And in spite of this legal protection, there is continued confusion as to what is legal for pets to consume, what veterinarians can legally recommend, and so on. If passed, the bill seeks to clarify that confusion while furthering the protection of vets. If the Veterinary Medical Board comes out in opposition of the measure, it would probably be tabled for another year or more. But even if the board would show a neutral stance on the matter, the bill could potentially move forward. Regardless of the outcome, the board would need to define guidelines for the law for vets to abide by before January 1st, 2020. So if you're in California, you want to let your representatives know how you feel about cannabis for pets. Well, I guess you would go ahead and do so. I don't know if you can call the veterinary board and, put a bug in their ear. Get it? A bug in their ear. They're a veterinary board. Bug. I'm trying. Do veterinarians treat bugs? I don't think they do. If you have a pet bug, can you take it to a veterinarian and will they treat it? I have no idea the answer to that question. Maybe that's why I felt like the joke didn't land out there in video watching world. Not its just relative lack of quality. As promised, earlier today I watched the Grass is Greener documentary on Netflix. Before we get into it, let's check out the trailer. Before we get into my impressions of it, let's check out the actual trailer.
My name is Fab Five Freddy. I'm a longtime cannabis advocate. The history of cannabis in America has long been tied to the history of music in America.
Louis Armstrong, Bob Marley, Cypress Hill, Snoop Dogg.
That's the sound I was looking for.
The era before me was on PCP, heroin. My mission was to get everybody hooked on chronic.
You know what I'm saying?
As cannabis goes mainstream, it's easy to forget the past.
Marijuana, from its entry point into the U.S., has been associated with African Americans and Mexicans.
Marijuana, a Mexican weed smoked in cigarette form called reefers, a one-way ticket to the nut house.
This is where drugs becomes a proxy to race, because you could no longer legally write race into the law. You could write drugs into the law.
America's public enemy number one is drug abuse.
The dangers of marijuana.
Psychiatrists and sociologists knew that there was nothing wrong with weed.
Our decision makers chose to ignore the science. They chose propaganda. They chose racism.
There is something to the fact of we, the public, not pushing them to do the right thing. We have sat around too long.
Marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug in the United States. Dangerous drug, dangerous drug, dangerous drug.
We're not the war on drugs, we're fighting the war on drugs.
So that's a new documentary on Netflix. It premiered April 20th. as you see there on Netflix. If you want to go check it out, my impressions of it is about a little over an hour and a half long, so it doesn't skimp really on anything. It doesn't skimp on the history. It's really great about telling all the history of marijuana, how it came to be a popular substance in America, also heavily into the connection with music and how it came up through the jazz scene and made its way through the beatniks to the hippie culture, and from there out to the wider world of people who would like cannabis once they got to know it. And it's really good on that. It's good on the history of Prohibition. It really goes in depth pretty much. I mean, it gives a good 10 or 15 minutes to Harry Anslinger and his role in marijuana prohibition, which I think, even though people like you and I, people who watch this kind of show or watch Cannabis News, are immersed in the community and in the history of prohibition of cannabis, we know the name Harry J. Anslinger, we know it intimately, we know what he did, but I think that this would bring it to a much wider audience. Obviously, Netflix has, 90 million, 100 million subscribers. A lot of people who don't know much about marijuana and the history of how it came to be prohibited will see that part of it in the Harry Anslinger story, and it's really, it's striking. Even to someone like me who knew the story, it's still striking to see it laid out the way it was. And so, as I said, it's good on the history. It's good on showing you how marijuana came to this point. It's great on a lot of the personal stories and a lot of the destruction that the war on drugs and most importantly the war on marijuana, and how it kind of spearheaded the war on drugs, how that destroyed so many people, especially in the minority communities. I would greatly recommend it, even if you're not interested so much in getting immersed in marijuana. If you want to know anything about the history of marijuana, how it was connected to music, how, any of that, it's a great documentary. I would definitely say, go check it out. There's a lot of great people in it. Obviously, the trailer showed a lot of them. A lot of different voices, a lot of different perspectives on the war on marijuana and the end, or at least the coming end, or the progress towards the end of prohibition. Go check it out. Grass is Greener is a documentary on Netflix. For me, it was up in the top, the top line. They're really pushing. I don't know if this is because they just know, I've watched some other documentaries on Netflix, marijuana documentaries. I don't know if it's like that for everybody. I don't know if everybody on Netflix gets the same featured thing, but they're really featuring it for me, and they probably will for you too if you watch this video or you watch this show on a regular basis. Seems like the internet has a way of knowing these things. This last story from MLive.com. First Native American community in Michigan legalizes marijuana. It's not really a great title. They're the first Native American community in Michigan to legalize marijuana. They're not the first Native American community in Michigan, and they've legalized marijuana. They're the first ones to legalize marijuana. I know, a small point, maybe not that big of a deal, but I think it would have been clearer just with the addition of that one word. The Bay Mills Indian Company. God, let me start over. You see, after complaining about their screw-ups, I screw up. What did I say? The Bay Mills Indian Company. The Bay Mills Indian community in the Upper Peninsula is the first tribal community in Michigan to legalize marijuana for adult use. Our tribal government does not necessarily promote the use of marijuana, but we believe that criminalizing it is a bad policy, said Tribal Chairman Brian Newland in a statement. Our new tribal law ensures that people on our lands are no longer at risk of prosecution for actions that are lawful elsewhere in Michigan. There are 12 federally recognized tribes in Michigan. As sovereign governments, Native American tribes have the right to set their own laws on marijuana, according to the National Congress on American Indians. The tribe now allows for the cultivation, possession, and use of marijuana by those 21 and older under a law adopted April 8th by the Bay Mills Executive Council. The possession limits mirror what Michigan voters approved in November of 2018, which is 2.5 ounces of marijuana or 15 grams of marijuana concentrate and up to 12 plants in the home. So it's an issue, obviously, for Native Americans and people on tribal land who are within the confines of a state where it's legal, and for it not to be legal on their land, obviously that's something each tribe is going to have to deal with. But there's a lot of potential, obviously economic potential, especially when it comes to cannabis, and that's something I would imagine will go heavily into the decision making when it comes to whether or not to allow adult use cannabis legalization, marijuana law reform of any kind on tribal lands. Thanks everybody for checking out the show. New week after 420, the aftermath of 420, if you will. We're here 5 days a week. Check us out at the Marijuana Times, marijuanatimes.org. Great articles, these shows, all these episodes, social media links, and more. You can subscribe also on YouTube and Vimeo. If you want the audio-only version of the show, search Apple Podcasts for the Marijuana Times. Of course, thank you for watching and listening. Thank you to Natureside, nature-side.com, and their organic, all-natural pesticides. We'll see you next time right here on Cannabis News.